everyone. Happy Father's Day to all of you fathers out there, those who will be fathers in the future. I want to say Happy Father's Day, and I say Happy Father's Day for those mothers who have had to stand in the gap in the absence of the fathers. But we celebrate the divine masculine in its fullest presentation as fathers. Again, Happy Father's Day. And then today we also commemorate Juneteenth. I do not say Happy Juneteenth because there's nothing happy about it. It's a solemn day. I don't understand why we are the only people that have to celebrate everything in a happy way that has transpired in our lives. When we look at our history, Juneteenth is like unto, but on a greater magnitude of what the Jewish community went through in that Holocaust. They don't say Happy Holocaust Day. They do not say that. So why do we say? Because we have been just manipulated over the years, and we don't really pay attention to what is happening to us. So I want to say this morning, as we move into this morning's conversation, I welcome all of you, those of you who are in the Zoom room this morning, those of you who are on the YouTube channel. I'm Asar, also known as Greg Stanton, the host of Serendipity Sunday. We're out here every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, and we have about a 20-30 minute presentation of a message that will give you something to think about, something to ponder, something to work on in the upcoming week as you go through your transformation. Because I believe life is about transforming. Life is about not gaining information, but taking the information to application that lends itself to transformation. For those of you on the YouTube channel this morning, again, welcome you. The song you heard playing coming in was the Winstons from 1969, Color Him Father. Father. And if you ever get the opportunity to listen to the words of that song, it really captures the essence of what a father is. And there's a number of other songs that many people celebrate in regards to Father's Day, but we just want to just simply say this morning, Happy Father's Day. Many things I would love to say this morning, but for the sake of time and that I can stay on target, this morning's message is entitled Sacred Cows. And I'm coming from the perspective of we are into Juneteenth, and many people are celebrating today a level of awareness that they consider themselves free. But you're not free until you're emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually free. As a people group, we are still held captives. We are still enslaved to the captors or those who have been our captors in the past, to their thoughts, their beliefs, and their mores and their cultural norms. We have incorporated them into ours, and we've forgotten who we are, whose we are, from whence we come. Earlier this week, I had an encounter with a group of individuals who you probably are aware of. They stand on the corner, they wear purple and gold, and they were, no, not the Q Sci-Fi, not them. It was a religious group, and they do not identify with Africa as their origin in no way. I just told them they lost their natural born mind. We're the only people group on the face of this earth that will not tie ourselves back to a continent or to a landmass. You know, it's really a shame. We will over-identify with the religious system. We will over-identify with our accolades of having matriculated through schools of higher learning, but we fail to really want to identify with our true essence. There are some black psychologists that coined the term alien self-disorder. Africans in America, in particular, Africans in the diaspora, suffer from alien self-disorder. At the core, we do not embrace the totality of ourselves, our ancestors, and as a result, we have the situation that we are in on this day. So this morning, I want to talk about the black church. Now, let me preface this. I am a product of the black church. And when you say the black church is not monolithic, there's many versions of the black church. Some better than others, I must say that. Having familiarity with many of the different versions of the Protestant black church, I want to start by saying the black church has done great things, that through the experience of the black church, many of us have made it, and we have a level of mental health wholeness because of the black church experience. But the black church experience has not given us the optimal experience. And I'm talking about the experience that truly liberates us. If you got the email that I sent out earlier yesterday, there was a video attached to it that gave you a 6-minute clip talking about the impact of the black church and how the black church evolved. There's many narratives that go with that, but I want to say this morning that the black church, for the most, has contributed a lot of positive things. But in order for us to get to that next level, the optimal level, we must be willing to let go of some sacred cows. The black church is a sacred cow. The black church's belief system is a sacred cow that we must begin to address. And until we are willing to address that sacred cow, we will be held hostage. We will be limited in our full expressions as who we are, whose we are, and our divine destinies. So, when I say is the black church still perpetuating enslavement? The answer is yes, particularly when you look at it from the perspective of the black church. In many cases, is doing this, attempted to do the same things the white church did, but it took a step in a direction which was somewhat right. It started changing the images to what from white to black, and it began to have a narrative that somewhat acknowledges the black presence in the Bible. And too many people just hold on to the one scripture that says his hair was of wool, that gives the description of Jesus being a black man. Well, I want to say that whole story of Jesus is a story. And if you can take him from being a white personage to a black personage, you are inside of a storyline. Why am I saying that this morning? Because so many of us have been given Christianity as our religious belief system, but we fail to really do a deeper dive into its origin. We are the only people group that will embrace the culture and the God of another people. We're the only one that act as if we don't have a history that really shows source divine intelligence as ourselves. That's because of what has happened to us. Yes, there's nothing wrong with Africans in America, Africans in the diaspora, Africans on the continent, Africans in the Caribbeans. There is something that has happened to us and continues to happen to us. It's the oppression we are under. I told a lady on yesterday, he who controls the pen controls the portrait and the narrative. Now that we have our own pens and a canvas, it's time for us to deconstruct, reconstruct, and to draw and to write a narrative that is consistent with our truth, just as well as everyone else has taken liberty to exploit their truths. Let us do the same. For as a man thinks, so is he. If you think with the mind of the oppressor, you are still oppressed. You must be liberated. And you cannot say that you are liberated if you're holding on to one of the most important aspects to who we are. The narrative that says that your God is first of all, a white male with a beard sitting high, or that the Son of God is a white male. Where'd they come up with this narrative? The issue, I say, has to do with our clergy, has to do with our seminarians, has to do with those who are the leaders of spiritual conversations, who are lacking in truth, who are lacking in narratives that represent them. So there's one of my favorite books that I purchased many years ago. It was entitled Our Black Seminarians and Black Clergy Without a Black Theology. And it's written by Dr. Yosef Ben Yaakman. your canon. And the introduction was written by John Henry Clark. If your clergy does not have this book, it tells you about your clergy. Too many of our theologians went to school, got their MDivs, got their doctorates, and too many have went to Bible school, and they've never ever studied the cosmology of the Africans. They've studied the Greek, they've studied the Hebrew, they've studied the influence of the Romans, but they seldom will go back into Africa. Oh, they'll step back into Africa, but only on the northern shores. They will step over into Alexandria. They'll talk to you about individuals who have, like Tertullian, and many of the fathers of the Catholic Church who were Africans, but they don't tell you that because they never show you a picture. And many of the theologians don't even know that these people who are the fathers of Catholicism were Africans, because they haven't done the deep dive. But Dr. Henry Clark does an excellent job in this book, just in the introduction. So even if I can just introduce you to that this morning, because I need to give you something to think about. I'm not trying to persuade anyone. I'm not getting into an argument with anyone this morning. I want to give you some information, something you to think about, and that we need to consider releasing our sacred cows. There's individuals who will go to the point and say, I know that Jesus don't exist, but I'm just going to stay with it. I'm going to stay, because that whole process of brainwashing, of acculturation, spiritual, religious acculturation, has been effective. I used to tell a story when I was running particular groups about how if you take an elephant at its infancy and you nail a stake into the ground and put a chain on that elephant, and that elephant is only allowed to go in a, let's say, a 12 or let's say 20 feet diameter. As that elephant grows, it's more powerful, than it has the ability to pull that stake out the ground. But because that chain keeps it within that 20 feet circumference, that elephant will ultimately, as it grows, it will feel the tug on its neck, and it'll get comfortable with the tug, and it realizes, when I get that tug, I've gone as far as I can go. And that is what the indoctrination that has taken place with us over the last 500 years, with the Eurocentric, with the Western spiritual system that has been given to us. What we find ourselves dealing with today is a religious system that was once ours, that was stolen and rewritten to fit them. It's time for us to take back that which is rightfully ours, and understand that Jesus is not the Son of God. Horus is the son of what even called God. Horus was the son of Asar and Aset. That holy trinity, Asar, Aset, and Haru. That's the story. We say the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That story was given to us by the Catholic narrative at the Council of Nicaea in 380 something. They came up. There's two significant councils: the early council of the Roman Church, 325, and the second council where they solidified. They took these stories, and now they had gotten enough information together to create a narrative that made some sense to them, and they sold it to the world. And even today, we have a hard time realizing that when we talk about Jesus, we're talking about Horus. When we're talking about the Son of God, we're not talking about the physical. We're not talking about a individual. We're talking about the S-U-N. The Son, S-U-N, is the life of the Son is the life of this ecosystem. And so no man sees the Father except he goes through the Son. That's attributed to Jesus, but that comes from the story of Horus, or Haru, that he takes the dead to Asar. Asar is the Lord of the resurrection. And if the person had lived a life that was attributable to going into the afterlife or doing it over again or whatever, they had to come by way of the Father. And only the Son could lead you there. We don't understand these stories because we don't know anything about it. And so if you're living your life based solely on what you know, you're limited to what you know and you're not going to grow. You must be willing to expand what you know, to refine it so it works. So this morning, I want to take a few minutes and I want to share with you. I don't know, for some reason, there's no one in the Zoom room. I don't know if something's wrong with that this morning. However, we're going to continue to press those of you who are in the YouTube channel. Good morning. So I want to take a few minutes and share with you, because many of you don't have this book. Many of you will not purchase this book. You may find it difficult to find this book. Our Black Seminarians and Black Clergy Without a Black Theology. That's the name of the book. I want to introduce you to this morning. He says, A Tragedy of Black People and Africans in Religion Today. Now, this book was written back in copyrighted in 78, founded in 1978, the year I graduated from high school. He goes on to say, bear with me, like a well-structured house, the extensive writings of Dr. Ben Yakman rest figuratively on four strong pillars. Those pillars include the black man of the Nile and his family, Africa, mother of Western civilization, African origins of the major Western religions. That's a great book for you to get if you are a clergy, if you are really feeling as though you're called into ministry. You need to get that book, African Origins of the Major Western Religions. You also should read Stolen Legacy by George James. Now, he goes on, he says, the fourth pillar, Black seminarians and Black clergy without a Black theology. Considering the time that we live in and the assault on the African mind by conquerors, the fourth pillar might be the most important. The greatest destruction of Europeans and Arabs in Africa was not the physical conquest of the continent and its people. Their greatest feats were the conquest of the African mind. Free your mind and your ass will follow. I'm sorry I got to put it like that, but the reason why you are stuck in the state that you're in, because you have a mindset. The tragic destruction of African institutions and their denigration of the African civilizations as primitive. That's right. They thought our civilizations were primitive and they destroyed them. The Europeans mocked and ridiculed African traditional belief systems. It was deplorable. But the real tragedy is that most of the Europeans trained Africans did it also. We have Black psychologists, we have Black social workers, we have Black physicians, we have Black theologians that do not understand that we are uniquely different. Now, if it's good for white, it's good for us, is their mantra. He goes on, he says, influenced by the European propaganda mills, some Africans began to believe that they had produced nothing of worth. Edward Wilmot Blyden, the 19th century Caribbean activist, observed that Africans believed that their only chance of rising to a position of respectful manhood and womanhood was to strive to be most unlike themselves. This is the origin of Black seminarians without a Black theology. Europeans, now let me tell you this, Black schools of theology or schools of theology are dwindling, meaning they're having challenges getting people to come into the schools. One, people are realizing that a lot of what have been taught is hogwash, is not a viable degree, is losing its umph. But there are still individuals who are holding on to those degrees, holding on their positions. Why? Because it's their livelihoods. It's what they do to put food on their tables, to keep a roof over their head. It so serves them and not always those that they serve. Europeans not only enslaved the African body, but they crippled and enslaved the African hope, its aspiration, and to a great extent, the African imagination. This crime is unique in history because it has never happened quite the same way to another people group. So when we talk about the enslavement of Africans, it's never been done. They perfected it on us. First, we had the 1,000 years of enslavement by the Arabs. Okay, the 1,000 years of enslavement by the Arabs, which was followed up by the 500 years of enslavement, total enslavement, and now we have the continuation of enslavement from a covert. From a covert manner. It's no longer overt. This crime is unique in history because it never happened quite the same way to another people. The reverberations of this crime are still with us because we are delinquent in understanding the role of the three major world religions played in the setting the crime in motion. So we're talking about Juneteenth. Let's deal with this sacred cow setting the crime in motion and in rationalizing the propaganda used for the continuation of the crime. We need to look back in order to look forward. We need to address a painful issue for ourselves and for our children. What role did organized religion play in creating this crime in the first place? And what roles does it play in sustaining the crime? The black church is still holding the line. The ideas, the practices, and the concepts that went into making Judaism, Christianity, and Islam were already old in Africa before Europe was ever born. The whole ideas upon which Judaism, Christianity, and Islam was built upon was thousands of years old before they came in contact with it. Their African people have a great strength and a great weakness. Their great strength is their ability to be open-minded, humane, and hospitable to strangers, because we practice ma'at. Their great weakness, political and otherwise, is that we have never become astute at examining the intentions of strangers and even those who look like us who enter into our homes. To this day, Africans find it hard to believe that anyone will come into Africa to do African people harm. The enemies of Africa have always thought of Africa as a prize, even today. Now you look at Korea, you look at Japan, you look at Russia, they have their eyes on Africa because they understand that that is a continent filled with resources, not only people, but natural resources. Africa was and still is the world's richest continent. If Africa is indeed the world's richest continent, you may say, but it is full of impoverished people, then something has gone wrong with the management of the resources of the continent. At the time of this writing in 1978, he wrote, "There is not one country in Africa where the Africans are the sole managers of wealth, generating resources of their respective countries. A greater tragedy is that not a single country in 1978 in Africa based its law and religion on the traditional culture and religions of the African people." And that's still going on today. Every state in Africa is an imitation of European states. In form, these states are alien to the original design of African states. So some of our beliefs that we hold go against the grain, go against the frequency of our frequency of our original design. He goes on, he says, when the Africans organized states permitted a cross-fertilization of people, cultures, and institutions. The nation state imposed on Africa by Europeans is a political straitjacket retarding African development. The artificial states divides African cultures between national borders and prevent consolidation that formerly led to African multi-ethnic empires. In the old African states, many belief systems were practiced within the state without conflict. Many states practiced and lived by values that would later be called Christianity. This was thousands of years before Christ was born. What he's alluding to is the what we would say like the Memphite theology that understood, that nature's role or nature, and they also use Asar, Aset, and Haru as its spiritual system. And the Europeans came and took that same spiritual system without understanding it, but using the same characters, changing the name. But the black church don't talk about it. And then people will go, well, I still believe in Jesus. There's no proof of Jesus. Well, if you want to believe in Jesus, you need to understand where that whole story comes from. Here's a good book, The Historical Origins of Christianity, right here. This is the book I recommend. Historical Origins of Christianity by Walter Williams. There has never been a man that ever walked the earth in the human form of any race, creed, or color by the name of Jesus. You need to learn the tie that this man Jesus has to not only to Asar, Aset, and Haru, but you also have to understand Serapis. Many of you have never heard of Serapis, but you need to know that Jesus, the European Jesus, was modeled after the European Serapis model, which comes out of Africa also. The historical origin of Christianity. I'm not going to take time this morning and go into that. I'm going to give you the task of getting it. And I guess in addition to that, that's the book I recommend you get in addition to this book this morning. So let me continue on with this because I want you to see the impact. So as we talk about Juneteenth and being liberated, the thing that holds us hostage, not just the black church, but traditional Islam, traditional Christianity, traditional Catholicism, anything that's traditional in that it does not represent us at the zenith of that, then what we're doing is we're taking on the belief systems of someone else. The thing about belief is powerful. You could believe a lie, and that lie becomes your truth, and it has a level of effectiveness. But in order for us as people of African descent, as what some are not calling first frequency people or the original design, and everybody is a deviation from us. If we the original design and we had the original stories, if it was good for the original people, then it should be good for us. The first should be last and the last should be first. And so it's time for us to step back and to relook what we believe in and to be willing to deconstruct it, to destroy some of it, and to rebuild it. Build. The one thing about the millennials is they are not just repeating what we did. The millennials are taking it, they're active in their belief system. If it didn't work for their parents, they're not working it. So we see a lot of the millennials are not allowing their shadows to fall inside the church or on the church. And I'm so glad for it because we're part of that generation. If you look at that story in the Bible, that generation that had to die off before the millennials of that time could take their rightful place, because the generation that preceded the millennials were always stuck. And we must know that if we are stuck in what we believe, we will die and move out the way, and the new generation will come. But there's some of us who has the wisdom to know that there's a shifting taking place. Some of us not only have the wisdom to know it, but are standing up and saying we've been believing a lie. Now, it wasn't intentionally given to us by our ancestors as a lie. That was part of the whole acculturation process. We just forgot, or we never knew where they got it from, that it had been adulterated, that it had been plagiarized. So now that we know all the major religions, Christianity, Catholicism, hats off to the Nation of Islam. They were bold enough, bodacious enough to take the Islamic culture out of and then to place, or at least to stand inside and celebrate the Africanness, the blackness. That's what makes the Nation of Islam different from what we would call universal Islam. To the black church that started off, you had the AME, you had Brother Allen and those individuals that left the white church and started the black church. They went far, but they didn't go far enough. They went far as changing the name to African Methodist or Episcopal or African in front of the name of the church, but we didn't go back and grab and put inside what it meant to be, because they didn't have a theology. The theologians still go to the white school. And let me explain something to you. People are beholding to the schools they go to because those schools issue them their PhDs. And their PhDs will never be issued if they're teaching something that's not consistent with what that school promotes. So that's why we don't have black theologians with black theology. But the day has changed. The Arab was an invader and a conqueror in Egypt. and subsequently in other parts of Africa. In most cases in history, the invader and the conqueror came to rule and to exploit, not to civilize. What passes for civilization in recently conquered countries is the imposition of control and rules of conduct by the conqueror to facilitate his dominion over native people. The light of indigenous civilization is often extinguished in the process. As invaders and conquerors in Egypt and in Africa, Arabs were no different from the conquerors in this world history. The Arab conquest of Egypt occurred at the time when North Africans, like Native Americans, mistakenly called Indians, became a victim of their own charity. They looked with favor on a conqueror that they thought would be a friend. This is how this happened. Because Europeans of the Hebrew faith and the people of the Hebrew faith in general have sent no missionaries of any significance to Africa, it might be assumed that there is nothing to be said about them in relationship to Africa also. This assumption is basically true in the matters relating to the large and scattered number of people of Hebrew faith that live outside of Europe. The European Jews, however, have behaved no different from the Europeans to African people. They played a role in the rise of the European slave trade, and they played a role in the European colonialism in Africa and in the broader world. They often played a role in colonizing other people of the Hebrew faith who were not European extraction. Now, the notion of black seminarians without a black theology is not completely new. Even though I'm talking to you in 2022, in 1978, over 40 years ago, when Dr. Ben wrote this book and Dr. Henry Clark penned this introduction, it still wasn't new then. The notion of black seminarians without black theology wasn't new. The African awareness movement of the 19th century was moving in the direction of seeking African solutions to the African problems in the Caribbean island and in Africa itself. Its greatest spokesperson was Edward Wilmot Blyden, especially in his book Christianity, Islam, and the Negro Race, and a smaller work by him, African Life and Customs. In the United States, Prince Hall from Barbados developed the first black Masonic order and called it the African Lodge. Richard Allen developed the African Methodist Episcopal Church. The African American community was Africa identified in the names of the churches and institutions without shame or apology, just on the outside. We never took it to the next step. There was an African cultural basis to the successful slave revolts in the Caribbean islands, Brazil, and other parts of South Africa. In 1829, David Walker issued his famous appeal to the colored people of the world. He summoned them to take up arms against their oppressors, Haitians or Haitians. We say Haitians, but they say Haitians. Revolutions set revolts in motion in the United States, the Caribbean islands, and in South America. Two of the initial leaders of the Haitian Revolution were African priests preaching African cultural awareness in an African language. The first half of the 19th century saw the rise of the Back to Africa movement. Negro convention movements and resettlements movements mainly focused on Africa, especially Liberia. Martin Delany, many of you hear his name when we're pouring libation, we'll say Martin Delany, and the Jamaican Robert Campbell went to Africa to search for a place for settlement. In the period before the Civil War, African fever had created a new intellectual environment among the so-called free Negroes, both in the United States and the Caribbean. Many of those who could not go back to Africa physically were trying to go back psychologically. We're at the point now where black folk don't even want to go back psychologically. Near the end of the 19th century, Bishop Turner emerged, preaching new and dynamic sermons about Africa, why we should return and claim it. He began his dynamic preaching about the time Marcus Garvey was born. For those of you who don't know, Marcus Garvey also was a part of the New Thought movement. Very few people know that. And very few black people know what New Thought is. New Thought is mind science. New Thought is taking spirituality back to its truest essence. Spirituality is science, and science is spirituality. So he began the dynamic preaching about time Marcus Garvey was born, and his activities went well into the 20th century. His book, Respect Black, contains his best speeches. Robert Redkey has written an outstanding account of Bishop Turner's Black excellence. So you want to get the black exodus. These writings were the stimulus to lead us to the consideration of some prominent people such as Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. While I agree with Dr. Ben that today we have black seminarians without black theology, there's a need to look at some of our religious and political activists who were seriously aware of this defect and tried to do something about it. In Africa, we need to study the works of Joseph Danquah, especially the book The Akan Doctrine of God and Kofi Asara's West African Religions. These writings of John, or the writings of John Mbiti, are informative in spite of the fact that he is an African Christian writing about African traditional beliefs. In its traditions, ceremonies, and practices, the Baptist Church is in the United States is the most African in spite of the fact that most Baptists are unaware of it. Reverend Albert Cleage Jr. has done the most in recent years to take the black church back to its African base and change the color and emphasis of the deity referred to as Jesus Christ. He opens his book, The Black Messiah, with the following words, and I want to share them with you. For nearly 500 years, the illusion that Jesus was white dominated the world only because white Europeans dominated the world. Now, with the emergence of the nationalist movement of the world's colored society or majority, the historic truth is finally beginning to emerge, that Jesus was the non-white leader of a non-white people struggling for national liberation against the rule of white nation Rome. The intermingling of the races in Africa and the Mediterranean area is an established fact. The nation Israel was a mixture of Chaldeans, Egyptians, Midianites, Ethiopians, Cushites, Babylonians, and other dark people, all whom were already mixed with the black people of Central Africa. The white Americans continue to insist upon a white Christ, or we can say the evangelicals has a strong influence over Christianity. They lead the narrative. Now, even with that, even with the approach to telling the story from a black angle, we're still perpetuating a lie. We're still perpetuating a mistruth. Why is it a mistruth? Why is it a lie? Because they will not associate Jesus with his origin. Jesus is Haru or Horus. Jesus is the son of Asar. So when you know that narrative, that story, and these are all three fictitious characters, it's a story. Asar, Aset, and Haru, or ours known as Horus, is the same story, the same trinity that the Christian theology is based on. The book of Genesis, as it tells us, the creation story, is the same creation story that comes forth from the Memphite theology that many people are not aware of, unless you're in the conscious community. But then I found there's individuals in the conscious community are not aware because they don't want to connect themselves to Kemet. They don't want to connect themselves to the Nile Valley civilization. Had an interesting conversation with the brother yesterday. He was sharing some things, didn't want to share his source documents. Anybody who refuses to share their source documents or where they're getting their information from should be held suspect, because they just want you to believe because they said so. No, this thing should be experiential. You should be able to go read it for yourself. You should be able to go search it out for yourself. You should be able to apply the principles, and if they don't work, stop trying to work them. So what is my issue this morning? My issue is that here we are in 2022, still dealing with old narratives that don't serve us. Even though the black church, not just the ones that have the name like African Methodist, Episcopal, but the church in the black community, be it a Catholic church, a Protestant church, or be it Islamic expression or a Hebrew Israelite expression, if it doesn't tie its beginning back to the origins and the influence of Africa, you are being deceived, you are being whitewashed in order that you don't see the truth of the matter. Why is this important? Because spirituality should be something that liberates you. Know this: the spirit was never meant to be held hostage. The scriptures tell us, even for those who are in traditional Christianity, said source or God created man in his image and in his likeness. It went on to give man its assignments. Man's assignment was to have dominion over the fish of the sea, the fowl of the air, and every creeping thing that creeped upon the face of the earth. We were to have dominion over everything except other beings. We were not sent here to search for God. We were sent here on assignment as gods. We have to understand that we are spiritual beings, we're divine spiritual beings, because everybody is a spiritual being. But some of us have come into the awareness, the consciousness that we are divine spiritual beings having a human experience. And through our divineness, through our divinity, we have the ability to master this thing called life. So if your religious system does not give you the tools of mastery in this life, if your religious system only gives you a ticket to be cashed at death, that is when you die and go to the great by and by, you'll walk the streets paved with gold, you'll dust the clouds off, you get wings as angels, you are singing the angelic choir. All of those things are lies. Why would you be called upon to sing in an angelic choir? All these things, we take them too far. Nobody's been there and come back to tell you that there's divine verifiable proof. Somebody just told you there's streets paved with gold. We were told as Africans during the time of enslavement, we were given hope that life will be better in the next, or in the by and by. And most people didn't believe that. Because if you truly believe that life is better in the by and by, and you're in such a terrible position, you will just end your life. But they also tied something to that. They tied to it if that you're in your life, then you go to hell, because they want to ensure that the slaves or those who were enslaved would not kill themselves. See, religion has been used as to Franz Fanon says, religion is the opiate of the masses. And anybody know anything about opiates or opium or any mood of mind altering substance, it takes you out of your right mind. And once you're out of your right mind, you don't have the capability of exercising your full capacity. And so religion is doing the same thing. We have individuals that are still waiting on Jesus to bust the clouds. When will he come? I remember when I was a kid, the conversation was 144,000. Now they changed that conversation. You don't hear preachers talking about the 144,000, because more than 144,000 have died within my lifetime. So we got this narrative that we are beholding to. Now, I'm not attacking your belief system, because I still have part of my conversation is still steeped inside of my Christian pathway, but I do not embrace traditional Christianity. I don't believe that there was a Jesus. I believe the concept. I believe that when you read the Bible, that the Bible is not the unadulterated word of God. The Bible is a book that has been compiled, the book of wisdom, and the wisdom that's inside of the book was not original wisdom from those who wrote the book. It was the taking of the stories of our ancestral people, changing the names, changing the stories, but keeping the principles. So if you understand the principles beyond the personalities, you will have an ability to follow the breadcrumbs back to the power source. So as we celebrate, or some of us, some of you, I don't celebrate, I acknowledge Juneteenth. I acknowledge it from the perspective of some people got the message. But even in 2022, we still haven't got the message that we're free. In 2022, we're still holding on to sacred cows. When you look at India, the sacred cow, all these people starving, but they could live if they would just eat that cow. Then you got people say, look, They're not supposed to eat meat. I don't eat meat. I bet you will eat meat if there's nothing else to eat. I bet you will eat vegetables if there's nothing else to eat. We espouse all of these things, but when our backs are up against the wall, what do you do? What will you do? So I challenge you, as we move into 2022, as we acknowledge the liberation that took place in Texas, let us acknowledge the liberation that needs to take place in the most important real estate there is, in your mind. He who is free in the mind is free in the deed, indeed. Think about it. Study to show yourself approved, a workman who need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. I am Asar. I am the facilitator here at Oasis Spiritual Center for Divine Living, uniquely designed for individuals who have a Christian walk, who understand that where I've been will not take me where I need to go. For those who want to unpack what they think they know and come away with something that's usable. Oasis is not here for everybody. I'm not here for the person who's never had the Christian experience. But if you've never had the Christian experience, you can glean from what I say, because I don't teach the traditional Christian experience. I teach a Christ consciousness. I teach that I and the Father are one. I teach that source is not male or female. I teach that source has a divine masculine energy and a divine feminine energy that has nothing to do with phenotypes, but has everything to do with the creative force. So, you're looking for something different, you found it. You want to know more about the ministry? If you're on YouTube today, go up into the channel in the banner and you can click there and you can subscribe, hit the bell so you can get more information when I come on. In addition to that, there's a link that you can sign up to be on the mailing list. If you're joining me today and you have heard something that has been uplifting and encouraging, considering going out to my YouTube channel, poking around. There's over 150 YouTube videos out there. They're not presented for gain. If you find what I say to you brings value to your life, consider sowing a seed. But I do what I do because it's a calling. I don't do this to live. I have other things I do to live, and they're quite lucrative. Peace. Again, I'm sorry. I thank you for your time. Go out. Now, here's another observation. Every time we are celebrating ourselves, we do it only to vend. Why do I say that? If there was no vendors at these events, how many people would show up? How many of our vendors would actually be at the events if they weren't able to sell something? I observe, I listen, I talk to many people who are vending things don't even have a black theology. Many people who are vending things don't even understand the history. Many people are, even our own people do the same thing that other people do to us. They capitalize on who we are. They sell to us because we're consumers. So I have to have conversation with the vendor. If the vendor is not practicing a level of ma'at, and they may not know what ma'at is, but if I'm listening to it, if they're exploiting me, if I know you're selling something that down the road I can get it for $20 less, I'm going to go where I can get it for $20 less. We have our own people that exploit us, just like preachers, imams have exploited us. We're exploited all the day long by those who look like us. It's the enemy within that you must be more conscious of. Well, that's all I have. I'm going to pop out of here, get out here on the streets of St. Louis, see what's happening at the Juneteenth celebrations. Follow me on YouTube. You'll get more information. Peace. I'm out. Have a wonderful day. I'm going to end with the song I started with. And the song was...